We really do appreciate everybody being here today as part of the Raucous Virtual Summit. My name is Trey Johnson. I'm from the Sage Data and Analytics team, and I'll be talking to you a bit today about Sage Data and Analytics. And so, again, if you do have feedback as we're going, as I mentioned, you can hover over the chat icon and put that Q&A feedback in. But given where we are, we're 5 minutes past the hour. We've got a bit of ground to cover. We'll go ahead and get started. So today's discussion is about Sage Data and Analytics, and specifically giving you just a little bit of a tour and an introduction, to the product itself. If you've seen the product previously, we'll continue to kind of dig in, and I've got a few new things to show and share. So it'll be very much worth your while to be on. If you've not ever heard of Sage Data and Analytics, we are the data and analytics product that Sage has brought over from the Sage X3 platform to Sage 100 and Sage 300. And essentially what we have been brought over to do is address some of the challenges that many of you have expressed over the years of being Sage 100 customers. Probably the most significant challenge that we hear somewhat repeatedly is that there's challenges around the amount of time that it takes, the cost that it takes to create and maintain effectively what are essential reports, for your organization. But beyond those essential reports, there's probably been topics today discussed around self-service reporting or BI in 10 minutes. And the reality is that talks to the appetite that more of your organization likely wants to have access to data and the ability to analyze things that are going on within the organization. Now, we all know that the ERP is incredibly rich, and so there's a great opportunity if we address these challenges to fix things around folks that are connected from any multitude of locations that need access to the information. There's also the desire to really accommodate the people that are really trying to make some very important business decisions in different capacities around the business. So there's a few more challenges that are on the screen, but I think the main thing that we wanted to review and talk about before we get into a demonstration today is really talking through what SD&A looks like in terms of the technology, how it addresses those challenges. And to do so, we'll use the combination of this slide, the demo, a few closing slides to really go through that. So what you're seeing on the screen is probably the most simplistic portrayal of what Sage Data and Analytics is as a platform. We also refer to it as SD&A. SD&A is basically a product that not only focuses in on the analytical side of things, which we'll spend some time on looking at, but SD&A as a platform brings your data very intelligently out of your Sage 100 or other ERP into a centralized data warehouse, all of which the software is running within the cloud. So there's nothing for you to manage. And what we also allow for within this data platform is the accommodation of data from a variety of additional data sources. So some of you may be sitting there and your organization maybe has changed a little bit as a result of recent acquisitions or other types of activities. If another ERP comes into your landscape, we can actually accommodate bringing that data into the same model and allowing for the reporting across those two disparate ERP platforms. If you happen to have other enriching data, maybe from your CRM applications or other applications that are unique to your business, those applications can come in. And as we oftentimes discover, there always seems to be an Excel file in the business that's got some relatively important data in it that needs to be brought in for the purposes of reporting. So SD&A automates the collection of that data from those different data sources, does so in a very time-efficient manner so that you have projects that run very quickly to get you to the point where you're looking at, as a starter, our out-of-the-box analytical content. That out-of-the-box analytical content covers not only the financial arena, traditional financial statements, which we'll spend some time on, but also accounts receivable, accounts payable, sales, purchasing, inventory management, all of which are ready-made analytical content that serve very much as building blocks for the things that you want to do in a long-term capacity analyzing your business. But it serves as a place to get started. And since it serves as a place to get started, probably the best thing for us to do is to switch over to a demo here and really start to dig around in the technology itself. So what you're seeing on the screen, and actually, there we go, get refresh going, is basically one of our out-of-the-box analytical dashboards. And so this is a CFO dashboard, and what's on this dashboard is a variety of elements that really reflect the financial building blocks that are part of the data and analytics platform that we have. So you'll notice that there's a number of different kind of calculations that are manifesting themselves as these different performance cards at the very top of our dashboard. These analytical elements basically not only show up here as singular calculations, but you might, if you're able to kind of see well, they're also incorporated into many of the analytics that are shown on the screen. So not only are they kind of building blocks so you have a key metric, but they also can become essential elements on charts, on other analytical reports, a variety of items that you as an organization might build. You might also notice that I'm accessing this simply through a browser because, again, this is a SaaS-based application. Everything is delivered and available to you via the browser itself. Now, what I might choose to do is I might choose to ask some additional questions and get some additional answers. So one of those things that I can do is I can simply change the filtering that you see on the top of the screen here. And what that does is that drives the changes of a number of different elements across the screen. If I choose to go back to where I was previously, which is the current month, you'll notice that the information changes. Furthermore, when I see elements that maybe are slightly above the norm in a good way, I can always take the advantage of that and double click and do what is a drill down. So we're basically asking a slightly different question, getting a slightly different answer. I can continue to navigate. I could drill down further. I believe this would take me down to the individual days within that week if I wanted to do so. And I can do that either by double clicking or right clicking. Now, in this case, I'm actually going to drill back up because there's a couple of other items that I want to show. For a starter, if I right click here, and this is where I get the opportunity to start talking about the fact that we readily support the financial statements that you want to do as a business, as an organization. I'm going to use this income statement dashboard as a way of really portraying that information to you. So within the context of this dashboard, we have a variety of different traditional P&L elements, but we also have some corresponding analytical elements that support us understanding, what's going on within the organization, both in a time intelligent way around the quarter to date, the year to date. We also have the ability to do a lot of other calculations that are time-based, and we'll hopefully explore some of those a little bit later in the demo. But what you're seeing here is you're also seeing the ability to simply select on different items. And you'll notice that it's starting to change, some of the charts, based on the selections. And if I really see something that particularly strikes my interest as a potential outlier, well, I can single click on it, and then I can choose to right click and open financials drill through, which would be a pre-configured report, or I could just double click, as I can do on any number and any of the analytics, and get to the details underneath it. But we'll go ahead and open this financials drill through. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data, so this is a very small kind of subset that we're looking in on. But one of the things you'll notice is that there's an ability to apply a bit of an aesthetic to this, make sure it's the structure of the data and information that you're looking for. And as a result, gives you the flexibility that if you drill through on your traditional financial statements and have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of transactions underneath it, you might make a decision from within the browser that it would be better off that you take that information out to Excel. So for users that have the rights to do so, we support their exportation of the results of reports out to Excel, out to PDF documents for the visually intense analytics, as well as to CSV files. But we'll come back to the importance of exporting that information in just a moment. But in this case, I'll go back a couple of screens here. And what that does is that brings us back to the context of this CFO dashboard. And what you'll notice is as we look at this particular CFO dashboard, there's some other elements that come into play. elements around the accounts receivables, elements around the accounts payables, and of course, a variety of others. Now, everybody that is a constituent surrounding the ERP should have a set of analytics that serve as a starting point for them. It's really our perspective from an SD&A solution standpoint. And so in this case, I'll actually open up an accounts receivable manager dashboard. And so this effectively allows the AR management to understand what's going on within the business, or in this case, the CFO can navigate into the AR dashboard and understand a bit more about what the team's doing from an AR perspective. One of the great things, again, is that they can ask those additional questions. So, I can deselect certain customers and just select a handful to bring them in so that we can see them, or again, I can select all. And part of our views is the organization doesn't entirely want to build reports and analytics from the ground up for themselves always, as is the traditional definition of self-service, but there's a desire to actually just serve that analytical requirement to ask that second question or ask that third question without necessarily having to go to a centralized person to build yet another report. That becomes a very powerful element. And as many of you have probably experienced, having something that comes out of the box, while it may not be the perfect fit, this really gives you a great place to start, so that as your team looks at this and says, maybe this information isn't quite as meaningful for us, well, then those elements can come off the dashboard and be replaced with other items, or can just simply simplify the view that your team has. And that's really the intent of the solution itself. So if I come back here to the CFO dashboard, we won't probably continue to navigate into other financial dashboards themselves, but there's certainly elements here that really kind of satisfy appetites for all different sizes of organizations, because frankly, a lot of organizations are worried about the same things, whether it be their overall performance, their profitability, where they are from a liquidity standpoint, and that common denominator serves a variety of SD&A customers very well. So if I do go back up here, and I'll see what we can do to navigate up one layer. Actually, I'm going to go up 2 layers here. So we have a variety of different categories. So we have the finance category, we have the inventory, procurement, sales. If I click on sales, just as a quick example here, and click into the VP of Sales dashboard, what you'll notice is that this is, a very kind of sales-oriented view. What you'll also probably notice is that there's an opportunity for us to filter across item groups, across customer groups. And those are great points of interaction to allow for the asking of questions and getting answers. But if I'm in a sales management role, and maybe this isn't countries, maybe this is regions or districts or things of that nature, as you note, when I select this different item, that actually filters across the entirety of the dashboard. So I really have the power of asking multiple questions and getting multiple answers back just by simply clicking and interacting with this. And it's our belief that people want those quick answers. They want that ability to get to understanding where maybe there's something that they need to follow a hunch. And then once that more significant item presents itself, well, that's when they want the ability to drill through and go to other detail and go into other reports as well. So I'm going to pull up the chat window on the second side here, and I'll probably try and answer it as I go. So can the hosted data be set up as a connection to Excel rather than exporting static data? There are some elements that are enabled. We can certainly kind of talk through that a little bit. Patrice, thank you very much for the question. That would allow for Excel to support aspects of the reporting. It's not something I've got quite ready to go from a demonstration standpoint. Our big caveat around Excel-based reporting is that probably needs to be somewhat limited to a lesser audience within the organization, whereas the elements that show up online here are certainly elements that can become pervasive, that can be delivered to multiple browsers around the organization. That's a wonderful question, Patrice, and happy to spend more time with you if you contact the Veracruz folks and want to export further. So, but coming back to this, so we've covered off, kind of some elements around sales, which those things are all inherently good. And this is all very much part of what we describe as our consumer experience, that is working within the context of the browser, but having a very simplified, kind of view of things. The view gets slightly more refined or slightly more developed if we kind of change tabs here. And so what I'm going to do is I've changed tabs and I've come into essentially the full design environment. So there are two types of users of the solution. There are designer users and there are consumer users. The consumer users would have interacted with the elements that we just saw. They wouldn't have really been authoring anything for themselves. They might ask additional questions, get additional answers, which is certainly a level of service we want to afford everybody. But then for those that really want to do any kind of building of analytics for themselves or for others, or as Vraakus and their team are working on the deployment for you, working within this tool set as well, those are the things that really happen within this more traditional design environment. And so if I click on this, one of the things that I'll just kind of highlight for you is we have both a public folder structure and a personal folder structure. Every user has a personal folder, so you can create and save favorites for different users that might be a very unique view for them. What we also have is we also have the ability to publish, kind of a broader set of solutions, within these folders. The folders themselves can be secured. So depending on what the user has rights to, those are the folders that they will see. The same is true of the objects within the folders. That's very much part of the analytics story, if you will. As I look across the items that I have open, because I had the benefit of sharing a little bit of insight into how some of the financial reporting worked with a group a little bit earlier today, I'm going to go ahead and select on a couple of tabs, because I think one of the elements that we've heard very often is, hey, we're pretty invested in Sage Intelligence, or we're working with FR, and logically, those technologies are maybe getting a little bit older, maybe not quite keeping up with the way that you want to share information organizationally. And so that's one of the reasons why, I think that Sage Data and Analytics was brought to the Sage 100 and Sage 300 market. As we look at views such as this one here, this is more of a consolidated balance sheet type of a view. And so we have the opportunity, again, in this design mode, the filtering looks a little bit different, but it's basically the same concepts where we can, manipulate and add our chart of account structure. We can support the navigation that one might undertake, and certainly allow for the scenarios where you want to look, in this particular example, against this template, at two companies side by side. And frankly, it would be any number of companies side by side. So if I include yet one more, unfortunately, this company doesn't really have any transactions for us to look at, but you'll note that, that would have appeared there. There are some caveats. Some of you are probably working with a large number of underlying companies. You might want your users to be a little bit selective in terms of the company views that they want to look at. But not only can we do this type of a view, on the balance sheet, in addition to a traditional balance sheet, but we can do the same things with profit and loss as well. So again, we can apply some filtering, and I know that I've got some slightly squirrely data here, but again, I can, show these different elements, and again, follow the hierarchies, allowing for me to go down to the account level if I choose to, and explore, kind of the things else that I want to do. The other element, that makes itself available in this particular view is you can do cell-based annotations of the information. So you can actually incorporate some comments that really live exactly with that data point on that exact analytical view. And that becomes important for some organizations that are really trying to have a degree of collaboration. Somewhat new, to the evolution of the SD&A product is some more templates that are forthcoming around cash flow management, statement of cash flows. And again, there's that hierarchical type navigation. The same is true with elements like trial balance. And I do want to talk to this just for a moment. So if I switch back to this, maybe just with a kind of an April type orientation, what this really has done is, we're making, continuing to make enhancements and supporting a lot of the strategic things that, that we want to do with Sage Data and Analytics as a platform, including support for financials, supporting, even more richly financial exploration. One of the challenges is oftentimes when we roll up a balance, that balance maybe needs to be accumulated since the beginning of time or since the beginning of the ERP. We call that a total to date. What we have found is that there's some elements that we can take on to enrich the underlying data model that make it that much easier for the purposes of accumulating that data. And in doing so, it becomes much more responsive. We're not asking for as challenging a feedback. And so the reports that would render in the scope of a couple of seconds are now very much sub-second type reporting. So as an example of that, where I'm looking back maybe across multiple periods of time, if I go ahead and choose this additional date, well, now you see the information just kind of comes back mostly instantly. And again, this isn't a browser. It's working against a data warehouse that is stored within the cloud. And so what that also means is that we're not impacting the operational nature of what you're doing with your Sage 100 ERP or with your other data sources, because we're removing that burden entirely, versus maybe some other technologies that really kind of hammer your ERP when the reports are being run, which is not something that we feel like is a best practice, because as your organization gets these types of data points, they want to ask more questions, not less. And in doing so, the more questions that are asked under some of those other models really put too much of a strain on your ERP to deliver those types of answers, plus do what ERPs do best, which is recording all of the transactions of your business. So again, that's just one of kind of the unique elements of what we're doing from a financial reporting standpoint. We also have, kind of movements, within the fiscal year. So there's a lot of things there that are financially oriented. The last thing that I wanted to show you in terms of just a visual presentation, before we maybe get into building a report or two, is I wanted to actually pull up a report pack. And so I'll describe it first. A report pack is basically a collection of multiple analytical elements, and those multiple analytical elements oftentimes are needed to be distributed to groups of internal users, but possibly even to external users. We see some reporting in business-to-business scenarios where you want to supply information to vendors that you're working with about their performance and about how they've supported your organization. You may be part of a structure where you have some parent companies or have external equity partners that need to have some insight into what's going on with the business. That's where we believe report packs really shine. And so what a report pack is if I start at the very front of this particular one, it's an opportunity for us to take multiple analytics from within the SD&A environment, not only the ones we've built, but the ones that you as future customers might build as well, and not only assign a nice cover page, but also have the opportunity to really bring forward what the user would have seen when they were viewing this. And what I really genuinely mean when I say what the user would have seen is you can secure the data in such a manner that if you had, just a random example, if you had 50 salespeople and there was one for every state, then when those 50 salespeople were receiving a report pack, if they were only allowed to see that state that they manage as data, even though it's the same report and the same report definition, when it's delivered to their inbox, that Florida rep is only seeing the state of Florida information. That Illinois rep is only seeing Illinois, so on and so forth. And that's one of the real powerful elements of this, is you can apply data security to the data underneath all the reporting versus having to create 50 versions of the same report for those 50 representatives. But getting back to this report pack here, this is visually what people would be seeing, within the application. But they also have the ability to incorporate as narrative elements. So this would be, mostly a pre-typed narrative that was going along with the reports themselves. but everywhere you see a bolded data point here, that actually is a real data point. That is something that is dynamically calculated and incorporated into the narrative, its text itself. And so that creates an interesting nuance. We've seen many organizations that are on SD&A actually go to kind of the next level and use this as the means for generating documents for the board or for their executive team. And again, it also serves very well for being a very polished deliverable for analytic content out to external folks as well. And so just to click through, there's a variety of ways that this information does get presented, and the formats, as one would see on the screen within the PDF document. And that is one way that the information is shared. But if I come back in here and I click on the plus button here real quick, the way that we typically trigger that report pack is through what's called a publication rule. And so what a publication rule is, it's effectively an email editor very unique to SD&A. Allows for us to identify the recipients and the subject and normal email elements as one would expect. But it also allows us to drag one or more reports or a report pack on as an attachment. And we can actually control, if it's a tabular data set, that it comes out to users as an Excel file. If it's a visual representation, it really probably is best left as a PDF document for those users. Then we can have a traditional formatted message that's here, but we can also incorporate links to the resources within this. So we don't necessarily have to attach elements. We could also just simply link an item in. And furthermore, we can incorporate calculations. We can incorporate, here's our list of top 10 customers directly in the body of the message. There's a lot of those sorts of things that we can do very easily within this editor environment. There's also a very special box down here on the bottom, and that's for events. And what events are is not what we're doing today, but it's more the way that the reports and the way the publication rule are triggered. And so the triggering of these publication rules happens either in response to what we call as a scheduled event. Everybody's familiar with the Monday morning at 7 a.m. Scheduled event, where we basically are ensuring that a common report comes out to a group of team members every Monday, as they start their work week. That's a really great solution. However, sometimes those reports get a little bit repetitive and people get a little bit desensitized because the information doesn't change quite enough for them to determine that there's some changes happening within the business. That's where the other part of the triggering comes in, and that's more of a data event. And so what really we're doing with the data events is we're quite literally monitoring and saying, hey, when stock level drops below a certain point, or cash on hand becomes an issue, or our average days to pay, it gets to a certain point, those can all be triggering mechanisms. Really, any metric that you set in the system can be a triggering mechanism for triggering the reports out to the users. And again, it isn't just purely a report. It can be simply a message that says, there's something happening with cash on hand. You need to go look at this analytic to better understand what is happening. That is more of a proactive push to those users that are making those decisions versus having to clog their inbox with a lot of email messages that maybe aren't necessarily the most important from an analytical perspective. And so that is really kind of a key part of our system. Candidly, it's a little bit of a sleeper feature because a lot of people are really focused on the excitement of that they now actually have great dashboards. They now have financial reports that they can share pretty easily. They now have the ability to do analysis across a wide array of different items. And so speaking of those analysis, what I thought I'd do is just build a quick, simple report within our designer here. And so to do that, I'm going to go ahead and close this publication rule. I'm actually going to close a couple of these other reports. So I'm going to discard that, do the same with this one. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this new resource. Now, the way that I got here is I would have clicked on plus, analysis chart, analysis table, things of that nature. And that shows us the quality of the data model that's underneath this. And so we'll probably briefly scratch the surface on what a data model is in just a second, but know in terms of the designer user experience, that user that's building a report, this is what's presented to them on the right-hand side. And because it's an ERP data source, there are a lot of different elements that one can report on. Now, it's natural to say, well, that might be a little bit overwhelming, but we've really got the designer's back in this particular case, because what we can do is we can actually expand the measures. And generally speaking, you may not know your ERP incredibly well, but you generally have a sense of the numbers that you want to go after. And so, for example, if I wanted to go after sales invoice line information, I would expand that. And you'll notice that there's some that have the icon of a sigma, others more of kind of a plain icon. The sigma icons, those are calculations that we have built in and included in the solution. So it makes it just that much easier for you to build the reports that you need to build. However, I'm just going to grab invoice line amount. I'm going to drag that to the columns. And you notice we really quickly over here on the left-hand side got a result. Now, as I close this and I collapse measures, you'll notice my scroll bar is gone, and all of these extended sets of topics that we would use to analyze the number that we have in focus have been reduced. And that's because that's where that's really where we've got your back, because we're making sure that the topics are relevant to the number that you've selected. We know that because we know exactly where the data came from within the ERP. We know how the data relates to each other within the ERP. And so it makes it that much easier. And so what that then allows for is I can do a few different things. You know, for example, I might throw a company up in the slicer, and you know that will serve as a starting point for maybe some level of filtering, you know, across a variety of different companies. Now, what I might also choose to do is I might also choose to go after something. Actually, let's do this with customer themselves. We'll do customer by maybe customer group. And so I'm going to add this to the rows. And so you can notice that we have kind of different groups of customers that are shown here. Now I can, you know, expand on these and, you know, be down more at the individual customer level. But I can go, you know, a step further. Typically the next step that people choose to take is more date oriented or date related. And the date elements that we support are really robust, and they need to be if it's going to be a real analytic solution and a real data platform. And so we support both the calendar orientation and the fiscal orientation if they're different. We even go so far as if you're bringing multiple fiscal calendars into the same solution because you're coming from multiple ERPs, we'll support those as well. But in this case, you know, what I'll do is I'll just grab fiscal, and I'm actually going to go ahead and I'll just drag. Now let's do this. We'll do time functions. So we'll do current period. Let's just see how current month treats us, you know, and I'll throw this on the column. Okay, so that's October 2021. Now there's some things that I have the ability to do. I can go, you know, work within the context of these elements, or I can literally right click, drag and drop, and that starts me building a secondary formula. And so what I can do is I can choose, you know, kind of some different things. So from a time basis, you know, there's a variety of elements that I can choose. I'm actually just gonna say, let's just go back 1 month. And so I'll put 1, I'll click apply. And, you know, so now we've got both the current month, and if I want to, I could rename this as prior month, and maybe I should, you know, so I'll go ahead and call this prior month because that'll be easier for us to understand. Okay, I'll click apply again. And so now, you know, and I'll even move this invoice amount to the filter to make this just cleaner. It just presents itself a little bit better. But now what I can also do is I can create my own custom formula here that we'll call as a difference. And so I'll call this difference for starters. I seem to always be bad at labeling things, so I'll do that first. And then we'll apply. And what I need to do is I need to basically be dragging up the current month less the prior month. We'll click on apply there, and you see that a difference is populated. Now from here, I can do a variety of different things. One of the things that I might choose to do is I might choose to just quickly turn on a chart. Not going to be the most attractive of charts, but that's one of the benefits of us having other chart appearance types, so we can actually, choose the different chart type here. I might actually, for simplicity, just use a tree map. That kind of gives us a little bit more of, kind of this squared orientation. What you'll notice is if I double click within this tree map, I can continue to do analyses and other things here as well. So there's a lot of visual flexibility. Highly encourage you to ask us questions about the chart types that we do support. We support a wide variety for the purposes of all different types of reporting. We also support the mixing of multiple chart types as well. And then the one of the elements that is more kind of on the sophisticated end of things from visualization is more the word clouds and the support for geographic visualization. So if geography is part of your business, you need to be able to assess what things are happening and show your users what's happening. We have a really strong component there to support that as well. So if we were happy with this report and wanted to share it and make it as part of the dashboard, we would simply save it, and then we could pull it into the context of one of the existing dashboards that we had. So that's really exactly kind of how things work end to end from an analytical perspective. We started with the more out of the box view, looking at sales dashboards, looking at CFO dashboards. We came in and looked at a little bit more closely at some of the financial reports that we have. We finished off with kind of a built ad hoc report here. Again, these are all addressing different levels of service of those users, making sure that people have BI capabilities that are available to them. The last piece that I'll just talk to incredibly briefly is the data platform piece that runs under the solution. It's very approachable. It's got a very straightforward user interface. There's nothing technically complex about it. We've taken a number of partners, including the Veracas team, through certification around this product. And the ease with which you can make the data that you need relevant for your reporting is a very significant part of this. If I click on add data source, because I do want to just leave you with this before we move on, you'll notice that we support a variety of different data sources out of the box. Smart connectivity to all of the Sage ERPs, even smart connectivity to some non-Sage ERPs, which may sound crazy, but one of the things that Sage Data and Analytics wants to do is support your continuance into the Sage family, and then as you move on, within the Sage family to other Sage products, say moving from Sage 100 into another product like Intact and the like, we're there to support you as you go on that journey. But those were the main things that I did want to share in that regard. I think what I'll do is I'll minimize the browser here for just a moment. We'll advance the slide to just talk really briefly about the packaging approach, the pricing. I'd encourage you, as I'm continuing to talk and kind of round out here, that if you have further questions, that you type them into the chat interface, as Patrice was so great to do at the beginning. But as we talk about the SD&A packaging approach, essentially what we've really endeavored to do across Sage and in our product team is to make sure that we have a solution that can be delivered incredibly quickly to you as customers, so that you can realize the value fully right away. What that ultimately means is that you need to be in a position where you easily understand not only the incremental service delivery that needs to happen to implement the product, but also the pricing and how it kind of shakes out and fits your organization best. And so what I'd like to do is just go to this next screen here. This is the different plans that are available for Sage Data and Analytics for you as Veracas' customers. Starts with the standard plan. The standard plan is very much an entry-level plan, very focused on just the financial elements, GL, AR, and AP. Great if you have a smaller organization with only 2 companies that you're managing, or a smaller set of users with 1 designer and 5 consumers. As you have more companies or more users, Advanced becomes a more relevant plan for you, along with the opportunity to leverage all of the modules. So not only the financial ones, GL, AP, and AR, or GLAPR, as I've heard people refer to, but also sales, purchasing, inventory management. Those items can come along as well. And so we do that on the advanced plan and the premium plan. Significant differences between advanced and premium: costs, certainly, but also the number of users. Support for additional data connections comes right out of the gate. Whoops, gosh, I was circling and clicked. Right out of the gate for the premium plan. However, you can also have that as an add-on on the advanced plan. So if you have Sage 100 plus another application, maybe it's Sage CRM, maybe it's something else, you can certainly add that on as an additional element. But the intent is for you to have a single price that you can look at and work with Vrocus on as to what best fits your organization, and know that this price is inclusive of the hosting costs and the software, with a separate incremental deployment cost that is the professional services that Vrocus's team would provide to you. So great. Next question I see here. We start with the standard level and later decide to upgrade to advanced. Do we get credit? Certainly, you can move midway through a subscription term. Since this is done on an annualized basis, say you're right at the midpoint, you very much will get credit for the second half of the year as you move from standard to advanced. That is a very typical scenario. The only caveat is because there's a little bit of difference in terms of the modules, there might be a little bit of re-implementation that would naturally occur because you would now have sales, inventory, and purchasing elements that you didn't have previously. Those would need to be confirmed, but typically that's like a day or worst case 2 days worth of consulting that would go into that. And then the same is true from advanced to premium as well. So you can make that, I'd call it a mid-flight decision to move up, and there's not really any penalty. And of course, to Teresa's point, which is a good one, you do get credit as you step up between the two. So really, really excellent question. The last little bits that we wanted to cover off is simply that if you want to learn more about this, or you want to share the great information that you've picked up today, certainly this recording is available, but also from Vrocus, you can get the ebooks for the different editions. At the end of the ebooks are actually a published list and views of all of the different analytic content that comes with that edition. So it's a really great way if you're wanting to share this with somebody else and say, hey, would you like to have a look? They can go kind of page through the PDF at their leisure and make some decisions about what best suits them as far as the technology goes. So with that, we've got roughly 10 minutes. I'm always a big fan of, for the last session of the day, finish a little bit early. Obviously want to be available to any questions that folks might have, but we'll really leave it to those that are in the session today. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. If you don't happen to get your question out today, we would be very happy to talk with you one-on-one along with the Vrocus team. So you just reach out to your account executive and let them know what you would like to discuss, and we'll be happy to join that conversation. So with that, let's see, I presume that all UDFs are available in the data set. You got that right, Patrice. So all the UDFs come through, as well as if you have any third-party components that add to the schema, you have the ability to add that to the data model as well. So anything that touches Sage 100 that might increase the number of tables or add additional fields, those sort of things, we will automatically discover that, and it will be your decision if you want to bring those in for the purposes of reporting. So with that, I know that I've been talking a fair amount, and we've gotten a few really good questions. Are there any other questions from anybody else that's in the session today? Okay, well, you know, the great news is this will be recorded. So if you want to go back and take a look and, you know, kind of revisit any of the things that I showed, happy for you to do that. If you want to have more of a live kind of interactive discussion about this and showing it to a group of the people in your own business, the Vracus Bloom team and us here at Sage Data and Analytics would be very happy to do that for you. At this point, we just really thank you for your participation in not only this session, but the event. It's really very rewarding to be in a position to come out virtually and talk to a group. And thank you very much for the great questions during the session today. So with that, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. And we look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you after the event is over. Take care, everybody.